This is kind of a funny situation because I really feel like playing. There's great musicians. You know, this is fun. Well, but the whole point of me coming here is partially to talk, I think, you know. Nah. All right, well, we'll split the difference. We'll split the difference and, you know, I'll tell you a little about my life, I guess, and what I'm doing right now, and then we'll play a little more and maybe take some questions, okay? I'm not used to having there's no microphone here to... This is on TV. Hello. I'll run through a brief history real quickly. I was born in Philadelphia. I came from a musical family. Everyone in my family plays some instrument or another. My father's a pianist. My mother's a pianist. My sister's a pianist. I play a little piano. And when I was a kid, I thought everyone was a musician. You know, it was the kind of family I grew up in. You know, it was a shock to me to find out that we were kind of an oddity. I began on clarinet at a very young age and played it not too well. And was more interested in sports, really. My first influences were, that I can remember, were Clifford Brown and Jimmy Giuffre. I remember learning clarinet solos off of Jimmy Giuffre records when I was about 6 years old. I used to play them to a garbage can for reverb, you know. And I had a little gold wastebasket, and that's where I practiced, you know. And to this day, I still love reverb, you know. Whenever I do an album, I always have to turn my echo down in the mix, you know. I switched to saxophone after hearing Cannonball Adderley play, and began to take it seriously, I guess, in junior high school, also playing basketball. That was my major pastime. And I started playing professionally, really, in high school. I started listening to a lot of Coltrane and was playing with a lot of musicians that were older than me. And I studied privately, which I generally always did and still do. I played a lot around Philadelphia and eventually went to Indiana University, initially to be a music major, and I switched my major at the last minute. This is one of my moments of rebelling. I realized that I had been playing music half my life, partially to compete, you know, for my parents' approval, you know, because that was the way my family was. So I switched. I was at Indiana University and I switched to pre-med. You know, it's a brilliant decision. And there I was stuck out there in pre-med, and that wasn't working too well. So I tried fine arts, you know, and meanwhile, all the time, all I did was spend time in the music school practicing. And my fine arts teacher, I had some talent in drawing. I became friends with one of my teachers, and he just told me to move to New York and play music. So he dropped a subtle hint. So I did that. I moved to New York when I was 19, and my older brother Randy had been living in New York for about 2 to 3 years at that point, and was playing beautifully and starting to work quite a bit. He did really well very quickly, and he was very nice to me when I went there and introduced me to a lot of people, and I didn't have to scuffle real hard because I did have some connections through him. Of course, I scuffled for a couple of years, but I always managed to work. I just took any gig I could get. You know, any kind of weird rehearsals that didn't pay anything, you know, and I always was fortunate to meet people, you know, particularly at the weirdest rehearsals. That's where I met sometimes the people that became most important later on. I also, you know, continued to study privately with various people. I tried all kinds of, I studied the Schillinger system and took some lessons from Joe Henderson and studied with Joe Allard, who uses me as an example of what not to do on the saxophone. And am I walking off camera here? Where's the camera? Ah, there's the camera. at that point, I neglected to mention, I guess, that I'd always been playing rock and roll and R&B. You know, in Philadelphia, I grew up listening to Ray Charles, and I'd always been, you know, listening to AM radio, much to the dismay of my parents, you know. And so I began, you know, really getting into rock music in college, and was very serious about it. And I really listened to a lot of blues and studied that idiom, and checked out a lot of guitar players. And by the time I moved to New York, it just happened to be that kind of timing where there was a kind of a need for horn players that wanted to play on records that could play something other than bebop, which I also was able to do. So I started getting some work on some albums, and I formed a group with my brother and some other people called Dreams, and we did some recording for Columbia. The records were an amazing failure. They were great musically, but they didn't sell anything. But we did get a reputation in the business as a good horn section. Barry Rogers was playing trombone with us. So we started doing dates, a lot of dates as a section, and I continued doing other things, playing a lot in the lofts in New York and jamming a lot, and just trying to stay active. After Dreams broke up, I went with Horace Silver for about a year and a half, and that was one of my favorite gigs ever, because that was like going to college for me. You know, I really worked hard. I practiced a lot during that period, all the time, you know, before the gig. I don't know how I did it in retrospect. I had a lot of guts. I always, you know, make amazing noise in the hotel rooms and get complaints. And I really wanted it, you know. So I stayed with Horace. Then after that, I went with a myriad of different groups. I played with Billy Cobham for a while, and then my brother and I formed a group called the Brecker Brothers, and made a bunch of albums for Arista Records, and continued to, you know, to tour a lot and practice a lot, and just also do record dates. Right now, I'm playing in a group called Steps Ahead. We just did another album. We finished it a couple days ago. And that should be out in a few weeks, believe it or not. And I'm studying composition presently, and working pretty hard on that. And I'm working around New York, and I play on Saturday Night Live every week, which is fun. And I'm drawing a complete blank. What else did I want to say? I'm going to throw it open to questions in a minute, because it's hard to talk to a whole group of people not knowing really where you know, everyone's at a different place. And it's silly for me to talk about harmony and improvisation, because that's real well covered here. This is really the best music school in the world, I think. You know, I guess I'm not really here to talk about that, but I'll, you know, if anybody has any questions about that. I use a Selmer saxophone. And it's a Lavaz medium reed. This happens to be dying, this reed. And the mouthpiece is presently a Dukoff D9. And I'm not suggesting that all saxophone players use this. This is what works for me. Everyone is different. Everyone hears differently. The only suggestion I can make is go for what you hear, and if possible, try not to let anyone sway you. You know, if you're looking for a sound, stick with it. You know, unless it's really obviously not working. I know when I switched to this, I had been playing a different setup for a long time, and I had to switch because of some physical problems I had. And I found this setup, and I liked it a lot. And a lot of people in New York, a lot of the saxophone players told me to not to use this. And now pretty much all of them are using the same thing. So I kind of learned a lesson from that. You know, I just have to go with what I think sounds good for me. And, you know, and hope that boy, I made this list of things to talk about. I don't really feel like looking at it. So maybe if you feel comfortable enough to ask some questions, I'd be happy to, you know, to answer them the best I can, you know. Does anybody want to put something into the air? Hi.
Yeah, on the heavy metal bebop album, the song called Funky See, Funky Do, you do that free jazz thing. Now, it sounds like you're playing two saxophones. What is actually happening there when you do that solo?
What was happening was that I was playing electric saxophone.
Oh, okay.
And at that time I was using a real cheap, kind of a cheap effect, you know, cheap thrills. There really wasn't much I could use when that was in terms of electric things. Then times have changed quite a bit now. But at that time I think it was called a frequency analyzer. And it cost $40 or something like that. And I push a little button. And I found a good use for it. It was kind of limited, but I found a couple things that I could do that enabled me to play chords and play along with it. And I think I was using an envelope follower and some other things. You know, I say they're cheap gimmicks, but actually the trick is figuring out how to use them so they sound, you know, so they sound good. Thank you. Hi.
Yeah, you say you listen to, or that you did listen to a lot of guitar players?
Yeah. The question is, why did I listen to guitar players? I did because I liked the way they played. But seriously, I was looking for other, I mean, pretty much my playing is generally mimicking other things that I've heard, you know. I'm not tremendously original, you know, I listen to things and then I learn them or I hear them enough and they get into my psyche and then I distort the hell out of them, you know. And what I was doing then was just I was very excited by guitar players, particularly around in the beginning, in the late 60s and early 70s. There was a whole excitement happening on the instrument, you know, the way they bent notes and the way they played the blues. And I really, I liked what they were doing, so I tried to, I figured out weird fingerings on the saxophone to emulate, you know, the way they would bend notes and try and get in between the major and the minor third, you know. And I was just experimenting, looking for other avenues, you know. I still, you know, I don't just copy saxophone players, although I still love to copy saxophone players, you know. If I hear anyone play a phrase, you know, if it really gets my ear, I try and figure out what it is, you know, or find a record that it's on and, you know, slow it down if I have to and figure out what it is. You know, I think it's a real useful tool also, you know, to learn solos or learn parts of solos. I know that's a question that's often asked me, did I learn solos? And the answer is yes. But I didn't have the discipline to learn whole solos, really. I did it occasionally, but I found it helpful for me to, if I was going to do it, to copy it out myself and not do it out of a book because somehow it sank in more. And I also found it helpful to, once I learned it, to play it along with the record to figure out how it lays over the rhythm section. But more often I took pieces, you know, guitars or saxophones, you know, trumpets, piano solos, and if I heard a lick that I liked, I'd steal it, you know. And eventually, I mean, my memory is not so good, so I'd forget it, and it would come out in some other weird, bizarre way a few months later. I found that it was usually 2 months. If I worked on something like 2 months later, all of a sudden it would creep out. I'd be playing somewhere, and all of a sudden, you know, that would come out. And, you know, it was never really a conscious process. I was never one of those people that could learn something and then play it that night. I always have to trust that it's going to come out somewhere in my psyche. And music for me is largely intuitive. I was talking about that earlier. I'm not a real intellectual kind of player. My mind doesn't work that way. I think fairly quickly. I'm aware of the chords when I'm playing most of the time. I'm not real tuned into that. Lately I've been more tuned into shapes and pivot points and melodies. Particularly when I'm recording, I've been trying to concentrate on playing melodically and less mechanical, playing looser, and just let, you know, what naturally happens happen, you know, without trying to color it. I wanted to do this. I was thinking about this earlier. Maybe this is a risk. I was talking also earlier about time, about rhythm. For me, I think the most important thing is time. You know, I don't know the word to use for it, swinging or cooking or, you know. Without that, it doesn't matter what notes you play. Notes are important too for me, but if I'm not somehow really connected in a meaningful way to what's happening in the rhythm section, it really is pointless, you know, in jazz music, you know, or jazz-related music. I don't know how to quite... I've never done this. I just want to... I don't know. One way I worked on it was to play the drums. I was wondering if I could just... This could be real embarrassing. Can you lift your seat a little bit? Just lift. Thanks. Thank you. Over the coffee. Right. Thank you. Bear with me. I haven't done this in quite a few moons. Want to just do blues again? Do the same. We'll just play a couple chords, play for a minute, and then I'll stop. Around the, I guess, the same tempo. So we're yeah. What? Mark, you want to count I did that, I guess, just to show I'm serious, that, you know, that for me, rhythm is the whole thing. I'm real attached to the drums. I don't play it too often anymore, but, you know, when I was younger, I really sat down and tried to figure out how 3 goes against 4, you know, what makes music swing. And then from playing with a lot of saxophone players, I used to play drums a lot with saxophonists. They used to like to play with me because I knew where they were coming from. And it was like the reverse side of the coin, you know. I suggest, you know, I mean, it's just a suggestion. If anyone wants to learn more about that, just to take up a rhythm section instrument and, you know, screw around with it, and it's amazing what you learn. Yeah. No, I've been thinking about it lately. The question is, do I still do I study saxophone privately? Not presently. I took a breathing lesson last week from a trumpet player. A lot of times I end up getting together with saxophone players, and a couple times I ask people for lessons, and they don't take me seriously, you know. But I've been thinking of trying to get back with Joe Allard a little bit, also. I don't know. Thank you. Hi.
Who is and where do you study composition?
I study with a guy named Edgar Grana, who teaches at Juilliard in New York. And that's a kind of expansive thing. It's going to be, I'll probably be there for a long time. And part of it's just psychological approach, you know. It's interesting. Thank you. Hi. Huh? Talk more about that? It's kind of hard to talk about exactly. I don't know. It's composition. It's giving me some basic tools. We're going to start working on string writing soon. Right now he has me working on it's going to sound ridiculous, ersatz lines. It's 12-tone writing, making a matrix out of a melody, and then I don't know how to explain this exactly. Getting voicings from the matrix, and it's a whole other way. It's just another way of thinking for me. I'm used to chords and notes, you know, and lines, and it's just a way for me to. It's another tool I've been using, you know, just trying to voice lines using kind of a different system, using this guy's system, you know. Remains to be seen if it's going to, you know, help me a lot. But I've written a couple of compositions on that, based on that approach. Did that help at all? Hi.
How did you like working with Hal Galper?
The question is, how did I like working with Hal Galper? I liked working with Hal Galper. He's a great pianist, and that was a chance to play a lot in an acoustic setting, because I was playing with Brecker Brothers a lot, totally electric, and I needed to, you know, I get crazy in either way if I get too much one way or the other. So we did quite a bit of playing acoustically, did some touring, and made a few albums. And he's a wonderful pianist. Thank you. Yes, I'll get over there.
What's the rehearsal schedule for Saturday Night Live?
The question is, what's the rehearsal schedule for Saturday Night Live? And it's a very, very hard gig. It's a tremendous test of will and patience and persistence. I get there at Saturday morning and rehearse from 12 to 1, and then I show up for the gig. Thank you. Occasionally we do a pre-tape. Most of the playing we do on the show is during the commercials, you know, and we play the theme and the closing theme, and it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun job just to watch what goes on in the studio, and it gets really crazy, and I enjoy it.
Also, there was last week there was a guy who played a solo with the Stray Cats, and it wasn't you. Real good.
Oh, that was a rerun. That was from I don't know his name. He was good though. What? Huh? No, he's with the group. He's with the Stray Cats.
Oh, he's with the Stray Cats?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I really didn't get to meet him. That particular show though, that was a rerun. We did a skit with Eddie Murphy playing James Brown in the hot tub. And there's two things that I don't like to do that I always get embarrassed. One is go to the beach, right? And the other one is dance. And both of them I do them, but I'm queasy about it, you know. And that was my first show, you know, and what did I have to do but get dressed up in a bathing suit and dance? Hi, in the back.
Throughout the series so far, we've had very negative degrees of comment on today's contemporary fusion. Obviously, I think we know possibly how you feel about it, but could you elaborate on that, and also do you consider it jazz?
I think it's ballsless fusion tripe. No, just kidding. That was from a review of Brecker Brothers. That's what, no. In fact, that was a review of Brecker Brothers. We weren't even playing on the album that they reviewed. They just singled us out for some reason. It was I guess my only comment is that I don't know, I never liked the word fusion, first of all. I mean, there was a kind of a fusion sound happening in the late 70s, you know. Right now, all I can say is I'm real excited by what's happening in the whole kind of techno world. I know it freaks a lot of people out. A lot of horn players and rhythm section people get paranoid because they think that the machines are going to take over, you know. And I really find that, for me, it's a state of mind. With steps, we're really working now with a lot of synthesized sounds and a sequencer and drum machine, and we're trying to work it into the music. And we've been really considerably successful. I'm real pleased about it. I said earlier, it's like all of a sudden for me it's like playing in Technicolor instead of black and white. We had a sequencer playing behind us. And I don't know, it's a tough question to answer because it's so general. I mean, there's so many kinds of music and there's so much good music happening, and some not so good. And I really don't think that the issue is electronics, but the people who are playing it, I don't know, I guess that's my answer. Thank you. Hello.
In your album, Cityscape, was that a neat challenge? Was that a good project?
Yeah, the question was the album Cityscape with Klaus Ogerman a challenge? It was a challenge, yeah. And I loved the album. I really am very proud of that album. There was, I don't know, that was a real unique experience. I hope we do it again. Klaus Ogerman is a really unique kind of arranger. Next time we do it, I'd like to spend more time. We did it fairly quickly, and the music was difficult, particularly the chords that he writes. What I did was I just threw the chord sheets away, and used my ears because I couldn't figure out what the heck he'd write the chord, and then the strings would be playing something really bizarre. So I had to throw the music away. What I tried to do also, was leave some space in some of it, And I don't know, that was a great experience. Thanks. Hello. Hello.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you used to practice?
Sure.
By yourself with metronome?
Yeah. All of everything you mentioned. I practiced with a metronome. I've never been real good on discipline. I hate to say it, I know I'm supposed to stand up here and say, well, practice, discipline, 8 hours a day. I've always gone in spurts. I have at times used the metronome on 2 and 4. I get depressed when I do it because I rush, It does help, I used to do a lot of arpeggios. I'd figure out a series of notes. I'd like a phrase, right, of 4 notes. I'd put it in major. I do it in whole steps, and do it in minor thirds, do it in major thirds. Backwards. Just string a bunch of things together, and that helped me quite a bit. As I said, I learned solos. For me, the trick was I played as much as I could. I played along with records, and I spent a lot of time wasting time. In a certain way, practicing. I have a bizarre. There's no system. I have no system. I just sit around and get something in my head, and then work on it for a while, and then maybe the next day, if I was lucky, I'd work on it, and somehow it would sneak into my playing. I try to practice things that are going to be practical. Certain licks, I was talking about earlier, certain licks or certain phrases only sound good in certain keys. I'll learn them in every key, just to know it, but I have to stay aware that I'm really not going to play a certain thing down at the bottom of the horn because it sounds like crud, Playing with other saxophone players has helped me a lot. Playing with drummers, just tenor and drums, was a real good tool for me. That's really kind of a saxophone thing. I don't know, how well that works on other instruments, but that helped me a lot. And I also keep a notebook. I always write the date and what I practiced, or the ideas that I came up with. And
Can you publish it?
right. The book is only 1 page long. So, no, it's gotten kind of, it's been a little thin lately. I look back at, and I see like the last time was like 2 months ago, and I just, oh my God. As I said, I practice in spurts. There'll be a whole series of a few weeks where I'll really be hitting it, and then I stop. And I play, and other things come up. I should also say that right now in my life, you know, my priority was always music, 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 you know, before everything. And nothing else really mattered. And that's kind of turned around for me in the past 2 or 3 years. So it's not that it's taking a back seat, but it is taking a back seat a little bit. It's still very important to me, but I kind of found through trial and error that that the rest of my life directly affects the way I play, you know, spiritually and mentally, and so I've been trying to keep, you know, trying to stay healthy and keep a good balance, you know, on a spiritual and mental and physical level, and then music fits in, and it's a lot more healthy, you know. I'm just not into killing myself anymore. I tried that route, and it was not happy, you know. I sometimes played well, but I was very miserable. Thank you. Hi.
Yeah, why have the Brecker brothers never done a tour of the United States?
Where were you?
Probably too young. I mean, in the recent years since I've been listening to the Brecker brothers. I've never heard of it, you know, coming to where I used to live in Detroit, and I've never heard of it, the Brecker brothers ever coming to Detroit or anything, you know. It never happened, and when was the last time that it happened?
We stay away from Detroit. No. No, we have played Detroit. We haven't toured in a good 2 or 3 years, really. So I don't know where that puts you chronologically.
Are you going to tour again? That's what I'm trying to say.
I hope soon.
I've seen you by yourself like probably 10 times, and I've seen Randy by himself like 5 times. And I've seen you all together.
It's in the works. There's nothing definite planned. We needed to take a little bit of a break because we've been playing together for years, you know, and you know, just for our own health, we wanted to just, you know, kind of do separate projects for a minute, which, you know, we've done, and we're in the process of doing. And he's making an album right now, and it's real good. And he and his wife are expecting a baby, and you know, it's exciting things happening there. In the future, I really suspect we'll do some touring and playing together, you know, because I love to play with him. We have I guess from being brothers and growing up playing in the bathroom together, we have some kind of weird intuitive communication. I never have to ask how he's going to phrase something. Like if we have to play a part, you know, we can just play it right off, you know. And I suspect Wynton has that with Branford, you know. And who knows? Trying to think of another book. Thank you. You catch my drift, right? It's Jimmy and Tommy Dorsey, right? Hi.
What was it like playing with Pat?
The question is, what was it like playing with Pat Metheny? And the answer is it was one of the best experiences I ever had. You know, we did a tour with Joni Mitchell together, and that's where we really found we had an affinity. And I've since recorded with him and toured with him, and we play really well together. There was talk about us doing something in Japan together over the summer. I don't know if it's going to crystallize, but I love his playing and his conception and the maturity in his playing. And he's really a phenomenal musician.
Thought about doing an album with Keith Jarrett?
No. That hasn't come up lately. But I'd certainly, you know, I mean, if the situation came up, I would love to do that, you know. Thank you. Hi.
I was wondering what you had to say about James Taylor as a songwriter, musician, about David Sanborn's playing.
Okay,
What would you like to play with both of them?
Yeah, it's actually a good question. It's, you know, a couple of my favorite subjects. The question is how do I feel about playing with James Taylor and how do I feel about Dave Sanborn. I respect James tremendously because he's a very innately natural musician, extremely talented and creative. He's a real brain in every way. And I liked the recording I did with him because he let us get involved in making up parts and determining where the music was going to go. And whenever a musician does that, you know, that is in the kind of sales bracket that he's in. It's fun, you know. It becomes real creative, and we enjoy it. As far as Dave Sanborn, he's one of my favorite living musicians, and I'm a complete fan of his. You know, the man can say more in one note, you know, than a lot of people in 10. You know, he just plays amazingly well. He's a real voice, you know. There's something very, I don't know the word, I don't know the word I'm looking for. Blank. He has a unique sound, you know, and a gorgeous way of playing lyrically passionate, you know. And, you know, it freaks me out. It's a real pleasure to stand next to him and listen to him play. And he's also pretty much my favorite player to play with in a section, because we have a real nice kind of way our sounds bond. You would think that they wouldn't blend, but they kind of blend real nicely, you know. I've learned a lot from him. Thank you. Maybe let's play. Two. 1, 2. lasted about a chorus and a half, you know. Let's do that. Let's do Oleo. Oleo. Jesus. What should we do? Is that too fast? You can't. Fingers don't snap that fast.